Thank you again, Mr. Jennings. Again, welcome to our guests as well. Appreciate your ability to be here today, and hope you feel welcome and enjoy the day here with us. I also wanted to take the opportunity. I forgot a couple of announcements. One was just a note about our upcoming father and son and mother-daughter activities. Those are coming up February 7th and 8th. I'll be sending a note out at least to the boys and the dads here this week as we get that planned. We're going to be local here for that event and are looking forward to a fun weekend as well. The ladies have something planned, and I think they've already reached out to many of the daughters and moms for that activity that coincide at the same time. Also, I just wanted to thank again Mr. Evans for his presentation last week with the Statue of Liberty presentation. I'm sure we'll do that in another 20 or 30 years or so, or maybe a little bit sooner. But if any of you get the chance to see that, it was just a wonderful presentation. It gave me a deeper understanding of that whole period of time in the 1800s. Not that Mr. Evans was alive back in the 1800s, but back how the whole situation with the Statue of Liberty came to be, and then of course all the work that went into the refurbishing of it, and in Mr. Evans' case, as he was quick to mention, the many ways that God intervened in his personal life as he worked through that project. So it was just a fascinating study, and I wanted to thank Mr. Evans for giving that to us. Free of charge, by the way, that night. So we really enjoyed it, and thanks to all who helped out in putting that together. We know the name upon whom Jacob's, or also named Israel's name would be placed. He had him placed on the lads, the sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. We also see in Scripture and in prophecy, we see Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph collapsing to world powers because of their turning from God in the end time. We know that time is coming. We don't know how exactly it's going to come. For those of you who were here about a month or so ago when Mr. Averett, Rich gave his message on the Rubik's Cube with how that relates to prophecy in terms of all of those coming together and how it's going to come together and when, that is not the issue as much as being prepared for what is to come. And in thinking about that and thinking of all the things that are going on in the world and what has happened just in this past week, it is just amazing to watch the events unfold. The situation that happened in France and all that, the attention that was given, and of course, rightly so, as it was a very, very sad situation of what happened and what the jihadists and extremist terrorists that are extant and making inroads throughout the world, what they're doing. It is an interesting time in which we live. One of the items that was not discussed a lot, it did not get the attention that France did, and I think many of you are aware of what went on in Nigeria. Here you've got Nigeria pretty much split north and south. The north is more Muslim, and the south is more Christian-based. So here in the Islamic area there, and some of the extremists that are there in terms of trying to assert in a sense, their own little caliphate there in that area, they have been very active in their goings-on. And, of course, one of the villages, I believe, I don't remember what the name of the village was, but I think 2,000 people dwelt there, and they raised the village. They killed everybody in the name of Islam and in the name of setting up the caliphate. We live in such a challenging time, and how is God going to allow these events to trigger the domino effect that leads towards the return of Christ? How is God going to do that? Is it as important to know how He's going to do that as it is to prepare for that time and prepare in our own lives for that time? Mr. Demarest, in his message today, got to one of the key essences of that whole situation for us spiritually. I want to talk a little bit more about that in today's message as this unwinds. Let's begin by going to Deuteronomy 28. You know, how is this going to happen? How is this all going to come together? I still continue to reflect upon this situation. If this jihad, if this whole extremist terrorism is going to be that act of what could be the king of the South that continues to show up here and show up there and do this here and do this here, to the point that they become more and more empowered and more brazen in their activities, to where they can do something of major force against Europe. Is that what's going to cause the beast to come to fruition, to come to complete power in then knocking down the king of the South? Is that how it's going to play out? Boy, certainly as we see things happening, it makes sense, doesn't it? It just makes sense that could be how that is all triggered. We know that time is coming. We know that Manasseh and Ephraim, Manasseh represented here by the United States, we know that it is going to fall. We know that the time of Jacob's trouble is going to come here even to this nation. We know that time is coming. But what does it mean for spiritual Israel? What does it mean for the Israel of God? We are the Israel of God. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for us in our daily lives? What does it mean, or of what does Israel's downfall, physical Israel, that we're going to see come about here, in whenever God allows that to happen, of what does that remind us? Do we see how it is coming, and do we recognize the lessons for us? Deuteronomy 28, we won't go into the details of this. Of course, this is the blessings and cursings chapter, one of two. Leviticus 28, the other. But let's look at Deuteronomy 28, verse 25. Deuteronomy 28, verse 25, as he's getting to the issues of the nation, as the nation turns from God, as the nation does not reflect upon God and live for God and live for his way of life, and instead take on these other traits. Look what he says will happen. Verse 25, Deuteronomy 28, the Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You shall go out one way against them and then take off, flee 7 different ways before them. And you shall become troublesome. Now, the margin in my New King James Version says a terror. And we can read that word terror and think terror and attack and a terror in terms of a powerful terror to others. That's not what it's getting at here from the context. And Strong's, in giving different possible definitions of how this Hebrew word is used, mentions an agitation or maltreatment, troublesome in that respect. We're sick of dealing with these people. They are troublesome, and so we're being defeated, and then we're troublesome to the other nations. They don't want to deal with us. They're done with us. To all the kingdoms of the earth. The context is that, and not we are exacting terror on others by the context. Look here at verse 26. Your carcasses shall be food for all the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and no one shall frighten them away. Look at verse 32. He says, your sons and your daughters, it is hard to imagine that this is something that will happen to those who have the name of Israel placed on them physically. Your sons and your daughters shall be given to another people, and your eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long. And here is the key verse that I want to build the message on here today. And there shall be no strength in your hand. It's, I don't know if you guys dream much. I have this dream. I have the slow-mo dream. I have the dream where, as I've told you before, I'm like getting up to a golf tee, and I'm getting ready to tee off, but then I can't find my club, and I can't get the right club out, and then I can't get to the right place because there's a tree or it's uneven ground, and then I try to get the club, and I drop the club again, and then I can't find the club, and then I find the club, and then I don't have a ball, and everybody's watching me. It just goes on. I have that dream. But the other dream is the slow-mo dream. Do you guys ever have the slow-mo dream? And it's where it's like, say, for instance, I'm playing basketball, and I get a pass to me, and I have this ball, and then it's like my hands can't grasp the ball. And I want to dribble, but how do I dribble? And I can't. everything is just slow motion and no strength and no power. Or somebody's coming at me and I'm wanting to defend myself, but I can't get my head. Anyway, I think of that when I read this passage. There shall be no strength in your hand. The nation itself will lose its strength. It will just be completely weakened, clear of any strength, just weak. And then he says in verse 33, a nation whom you have not known shall eat the fruit of your land and the produce of your labor, and you shall be only oppressed and crushed continually. Oppressed and crushed continually. Finally, in this passage here, verse 43, we know this passage, but it says, the alien who is among you shall rise higher and higher. You talk about loss of strength. And then he says above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. Weakened and lower and lower. Are we at that point as a nation? As I was listening to Cliff's message, you think of the busyness that we have. There's still the hustle and bustle, and we see the underneath the somewhat success that we still continue to experience in this nation. We see underneath how fragile that is and how quickly that can deteriorate. But are we at that point where we are completely weak and we have no strength and no power and no might? We're not there yet. The Bible talks about it happening quickly. But there's a parallel to that as we get to the message today. Let's go to Amos 1. I want to talk about an experience that was going on in Israel that I think to someday not only correlates to where our nation is presently, but also correlates to us in our spiritual lives. I mean, that's the Israel of God. What's going on in our spiritual lives? That's the key lesson we want to get to. But let's start with this today. Amos 1, of course, those of you that have studied Amos have recognized the time frame of Amos. It appears that it was written somewhere in the 750 to 760 BC range. But so here we are in the kingdom is divided. You've got the kingdom of the north, the kingdom of the south. Kingdom of the south being the kingdom of Judah, and the north the 10 tribes. And the nations have gone through extreme difficulties because of not following God's way and other oppression that they've received. But then things have changed. At this point in history, it's amazing the transformation of what has happened in not only northern Israel, but also the southern kingdom. And let's look at that here to get the backdrop. We're going to go to a couple of passages, well, actually about 5 passages to talk about this before we get into the rest of the message. The words of Amos, who was among the sheep breeders of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, which he saw in Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. So Uzziah was king of the southern kingdom. And in the days of Jeroboam, it's not Jeroboam the son of Nebat, but Jeroboam the second, the son of Joash, king of Israel. So you got Jeroboam the second in the north. You got Uzziah down here in the south. Okay, so these two individuals were in power. Let's go to 2 Kings now. 2 Kings, and let's look at what was going on during that time. 2 Kings 14. 2 Kings 14, verse 23. 2 Kings 14:23, in the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the second, son of Joash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria. Samaria is the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel. He reigned 41 years, so the individual has a long reign. Verse 24, he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin when they were first established. Verse 25. Now we're getting into the technicalities of what happened during Jeroboam II's reign. Look at what happens to Israel, the northern tribes. It says, he restored the territory of Israel from the entrance of Hamath to the sea of the Arabah. If you've got a map of kind of the Middle East, Hamath is up north of Damascus. Damascus, capital of Syria, And even north of that is the area of Hamath. So he had conquered all the way up there. That's what David had been able to conquer. He got all the way up into that area, and then all the way down to the Sea of Arabah, meaning, Sea of Arabah, Dead Sea. So all the way down to, as you get to the northern part of the Dead Sea, that kind of pretty much runs along the southern part of the northern kingdom. So he got all of that back. And this is way after David. It says here, according to the word of the Lord God of Israel, which he had spoken through his servant Jonah, the prophet who was from Gath-Hepher. Verse 26, and this is, again, another interesting thing about our Father whom we worship. At what state was Israel here? Was Israel following God? No. Jeroboam II did evil in the sight of God. But here's what God did. For the Lord saw that the affliction of Israel was very bitter, and whether bond or free, there was no helper for Israel. And the Lord did not say that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, this evil king, the son of Joash. And then it says the rest of the things that he did. Verse 28, let's continue. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam II and all that he did, his might, how he made war, and how he recaptured for Israel from Damascus and Hamath what had belonged to Judah. And are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Are they not written there? Well, let's look. 2 Chronicles 26. 2 Chronicles 26. So here, the northern king, even though he did what was evil in the sight of God, God had mercy upon them as they suffered, and he caused them to be strengthened with great might and have power to recover all this area. 2 Chronicles 26, verse 1. Here's what's happening at that same time that the book of Amos is written. Here's what's happening in Judah. Verse 1, now all the people of Judah took Uzziah, he was just 16 years old when this happened, and made him king instead of his father. He built Elat. Elat is that southern port city all the way down at the Gulf of Aqaba that leads into the Red Sea. The Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba come down and lead into the Red Sea. So here he got that, established that port city, so they were able to do all kinds of commerce out into the oceans of the world, and restored it to Judah. And after the king rested with his fathers, Uzziah was 16 when he became king, and he reigned 52 years. So Uzziah had a very long reign as well. Verse 4, he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah had done. He sought God, this Uzziah, in the days of Zechariah, who had understanding in the visions of God. Notice this statement, and as long as he, Uzziah, sought the Lord, God made him prosper. He made war with the Philistines. He took care of them. He dealt with the Ammonites. And conquered these areas. His fame spread as far as the entrance of Egypt, for he became exceedingly strong. So it talks about other accomplishments, and then notice verse 15. And he made devices in Jerusalem, invented by skillful men, all these different war implements and ways to attack and defend cities, to be on the towers, the corners, shoot arrows and large stones. So his fame spread far and wide, for he was marvelously helped by God till he became strong. So here were two individuals of two separate kingdoms who began to experience incredible prosperity, conquering, even to the point of getting back to the original Davidic size kingdom. Let's now go back to Amos and see how Amos views all of this. Well, how God views all of this through the mouth of Amos. So think about this as we read this from the standpoint of our nation today. As we see duality in prophecy, think about that. Think about the Israel of God. What about us? How do we view this? How does this speak to us in any way as God's people? Amos 6. So here they are at this situation. Macmillan's Bible Atlas, in talking about the conquests of Jeroboam II and Uzziah, mentions that the borders of the two kingdoms were extended until together they resembled those of David's kingdom at the height of its power, as as I stated, even though the kingdom of Israel held the more prominent position, Uzziah was able to make Judah a strong and well-developed kingdom. It also states that 2 other wars were fought during that time, and it's apparent that all of Transjordan now returned to Israelite control. All the area east of the Jordan River they were able to get control of. From the summary of the reign of Jeroboam II, it becomes evident that he annexed to his kingdom all of that area of Damascus and Syria, Lebanon, and even the kingdom of Hamath may have also recognized his overlordship. So here they're just in a great position. Here finally, Israel and Judah is experiencing incredible prosperity. They're doing very, very well. Amos 6, verse 1. Woe to you, what's he say? In this state, finally we've arrived. Finally we're coming together and experiencing prosperity. And he says, woe to you who are at ease in Zion. Zion, Mount Zion, where Jerusalem is, and trust in Mount Samaria, reflecting the northern tribes, notable persons in the chief nation to whom the house of Israel comes. Go over to Calneh and see what happened there. Go over to Hamath the great. Go over to Gath of the Philistines. Are you better than any of these kingdoms? Or is their territory greater than your territory? Woe to you who put far off the day of doom, who caused the seat of violence to come near by their inappropriate actions. Verse 4, and they're in this state of ease, who lie on beds of ivory, stretch out on your couches, eat lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stall. Everybody likes a good piece of meat, not getting that, but it's this whole lifestyle that they're experiencing absent of God. And calves from the midst of the stall, who sing idly to the sound of stringed instruments, and invent for yourself musical instruments like David, drinking wine from bowls, not just a little cup, but bowls, anointing yourselves with the best ointments. But verse 6 says, but are not grieved for the affliction of Joseph. He's saying, do we not see what's going on all around us there in that time? Great prosperity. Do we not see the affliction of Joseph? I submit to you, we are in that same situation. Do we as God's people, do we see the affliction of Joseph? I was just listening, it was yesterday on the news. They had a lady that came. She's the one who's the spokesperson for Planned Parenthood. There's this whole discussion that's going on now about, when does the fetus, the baby in the womb begin to feel pain? And she was very frustrated with the comments that were going out because of several of the states have stated that we will not permit abortions to be performed after this date because scientific evidence has been shown that demonstrates that the baby in the womb actually feels the pain of what's happening to it. And she's taking exception to that because she said, show me the science on that. The science that I'm seeing and the reports that I'm seeing are suspect. So there's this debate going about when you can do that. I mean, I can't even have a conversation with someone like that. How do you even start the conversation on a subject like that? It's awful. It's deplorable. It is one of the aspects of being grieved for the affliction of Joseph. And I don't condemn these people. They don't know. They don't know God's way of life. They've not been given what we've been given, and I'm humbled by that. But I am, as we all are, we're grieved for the affliction of Joseph. That's just one example of the affliction that is taking place in Joseph. He says in verse 7, so therefore they shall now go captive as the first of the captives, and those who recline at the banquets shall be removed. The Lord God has sworn by himself. The Lord God of hosts says, I abhor the pride of Jacob. I hate that. I hate it. I hate it. I hate his palaces. Therefore, I will deliver up the city and all that is in it. He states in verse 11, for behold, the Lord gives a command. He'll break that great house into bits and the little house into pieces. Do horses run on rocks? Does one plow there with oxen on the rocks? Yet he says justice is being turned into gall, the fruit of righteousness into wormwood. You who rejoice over Lo-debar, who say, we have we not taken Karnaim for ourselves by our own strength? There he goes. And that's getting at what we're going to talk about today. By our own strength. How did that happen? How did you attain what you did, God is asking. Did you do it by your own strength? That's what they're saying they did. But behold, I will raise up a nation against you, O house of Israel, says the Lord God of hosts, and they will afflict you from where to where? The very most northern part of what they now controlled, and the very most southern part of what Israel had controlled, the valley of Arabah. When we think about that, as we think of where our nation is today, do we see the parallels? Do we see how we spiritually can also slide into that way of thinking? Let's go back one other passage in Amos 3, and we'll get to the title of the message. Amos 3, verse 1. Hear this word that the Lord has spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, and then he goes through and says all the reasons why things are not going well. Let's come to verse 11. He says this, therefore, thus says the Lord God, an adversary shall be all around the land, and he shall sap your strength from you, and your palaces shall be plundered. He shall sap your strength from you. What about us? What about us? What about spiritual Israel? What about you and me? Are we sharp and focused? And is our spiritual strength where we feel like we can battle what we need to battle? Or do we see our spiritual strength being systematically, day by day, sapped from us? Do you see that happening in your own life? The title of the message today is Strengthened and Sharpened, or Sapped and Tapped. Which are we? Which are we? What are you? Where are you at this point in your life? Where am I at this point? Cliff made a very important point that I think ties with what I'm hoping to get to today through Scripture. I believe presently this is where the battle rages with so many of us in what we're going through. We may have this going well, we may have this here, but so many things are going on in our lives. But it describes this strengthened or sharpened or sapped or tapped. It describes how we're in danger of allowing ourselves to be worn ragged, to just be worn out by life, by the stresses, the challenges, as Cliff said, the busyness of life, to be worn down, and it can occur and hit us in so many ways. If we're not exercising spiritually, if we're not really engaged in spiritual exercise, we won't know that we've been sapped to the degree that we have until we call upon it and realize that it's not there. Where is what I need strength-wise to be able to do what I need to do spiritually to get through this situation? We know, let's turn to Hebrews 5, one of the more familiar passages of the New Testament that we quote many times in our lives as we look in our own lives spiritually to do a check of where we are. This gets at the essence of this whole thing of strengthened and sharpened or sapped and tapped. Hebrews 5 talks about how, he wants to tell them more about this situation. He says they've become dull of hearing. It's difficult to explain the whole discussion of Melchizedek, and we talked about that to some degree in the tithe sermon several weeks ago. But he talks about being teachers, should be there at teachers, and he's got to go back. And then he makes this statement in verse 14: solid food, the good, healthy steak, the meat and potatoes, the substance of good kinds of things that you got to really crank on with those back molars to break down. It's good, solid food that's packed with lots of protein. But solid food belongs to those who are of full age, that is, who by reason of use, they're using it day in and day out. They're exercising it day out and day in and day out. They have their senses exercised. So they're looking, they're focused, they're tuned into what's going on. They're not in the Amos 6 situation of, hey man, it's all good. It's all good, and we're finally where we need to be. Their senses are exercised to see the afflictions of Joseph, to see the battles that are raging in their lives, and they're watching. Their spiritual senses are totally engaged to discern good and evil and get away from evil, cling to good. See that. No, this is bad. I'm here. We're focused and dedicated and full on it, practicing the senses, honing to the requirements of the activity in which we're engaged. The best way that I can explain it is a situation with my leaf raking, which I've told you about before. Finally, Texas really disturbs me in the way that leaves fall at different times. Ohio, late October, November, boom, it's done. And by Thanksgiving, you've got all the leaves raked and you're ready for the horrible, long, cold, gray winter. But besides that, you get your leaves taken care of in a few weeks, where I've got, as I've told you before, I've got the live oak that drives me nuts. I've got 2 of them out front. I like them being green, but they decide on their own when they want to lose their leaves. So I've got to deal with that. But I've got my oak, our other oak. It's not a live oak, but it finally lost all of its leaves about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So I was out there and I hadn't raked leaves for a while. So I'm raking leaves with this. I call it a massive rake, but it's probably about that wide, and it's plastic, very heavy, tough on Burnett's wimpy back. But I'm raking these leaves, and then I'm squatting down. The leaves are very dry, and I do the method where I get the rake down, and I get my other hand and just glove it. I get a glove and just kind of pick it up and then put it in the bag. And it's probably, when I pack that all together, it's probably a whopping 1.75 pounds, maybe 2 pounds. And then the next day I'm dying. My back is killing me. I've bent down, 75, 100 times to pick up these things, and so I'm out of shape. My body and my senses and everything have not been exercised for leaf picker-uppers. It's not set for that. It's the same with painting. You paint once every 20 years, whether the inside of your house needs it or not, and you're on the ladder and you're standing, and I tend to, I don't know why I do this, but I tend to go barefoot while I'm standing, but then my feet are killing me. It's wide little area that I stand on. Should be plenty of room for my feet, but the next day my feet are aching. My deltoids are burning from lifting that very heavy 6-ounce paint brush, and I'm working, and I'm not in shape. I'm not in shape for painting. I'm not in shape for raking. So when I call upon the strength that is needed to engage in that tremendously physically demanding exercise of raking and painting, it's not there. In basketball, I experienced this at the Winter Family Weekend. I hadn't played since camp, and I only played just a little bit at camp, so it was 5 months since I had played basketball. And you haven't touched a ball, and then you're getting the ball, and you're grabbing it, and you're trying to dribble, and you're thinking, okay, where's the ball going to come back? And, there's somebody that's open. I'll pass to them. I pass to them, and then 2 or 3 defensive guys are already there at the ball. It's just, it's delayed. It's not there. I'm not sharp. My senses have not been exercised for that activity. You make a move one way, and you think you're going to, shuck and jive and go this way and make it happen, and the guy's like, well, yeah, I saw you move there, and I'm here. I'm ready for you now. It's ridiculous. But it's that thing of I've been out of practice. It goes very quickly. But if we continue to practice and remain rooted in the fundamentals of the game, doing the little things right day in and day out, when it comes time to perform, it's there. It's there, and it's ready to be used. It's been exercised. Everything is honed for that activity. The book of Judges gives us an excellent example of this spiritually. Where are we in our spiritual exercise regimen as God's people? Are we strengthening and sharpening while our bodies are deteriorating? Some young people here, your bodies are actually getting stronger. Many of us here, our bodies are not doing that. But are we strengthening and sharpening our spiritual body? Judges here we think of the example of one of those that comes to mind. Let's start about this story here in Judges 16, verse 16. Judges 16:16, and it came to pass when she, that lady Delilah, pestered Samson, Judges 16:16, pestered him daily with her words and pressed him about what is the secret to your strength, that finally his soul was vexed to death. I'm done with this woman. She will not stop. She is killing me. So verse 17, he told her all his heart and said to her, no razor has ever come upon my head, for I've been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I'm shaven, then my strength will leave me. Then I shall become weak and be like any other man. So when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up once more, for he's told me all his heart. So the lords of the Philistines came and brought the money in their hands. So she got her payoff. She lulled him to sleep on her knees and called for a man to shave off the 7 locks of his head. So he did that. She began then to torment him. Just wonderful woman, this Delilah. She began to torment him, and his strength left him. Now, that's a very important statement here, the way that it's said. It says, and his strength left him. But notice verse 20. So, and she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. So he woke from his sleep and said, well, I'll go out as before at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. He didn't know. He didn't know. How if we are exercising daily and constantly training, how can we come to the point where we do not realize that God has departed from us? How can that happen? I submit to you that it will not happen if we are training and focus daily on our spiritual exercise regimen. He had not been doing so. Interestingly enough, in Samson's life, which again has been brought out before here over the last 2 years and in other sermons by individuals, Samson's name shows up in Hebrews 11. He is one of the faithful. Samson obviously repented of that, and God delivered him and strengthened him in that respect at the end of his life as he sought God and served God to the point of his death. He was delivered in that respect. But anyway, so it says here, he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. So what happened? The Philistines took him and put his eyes out and brought him down to Gaza. They bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. Did not stay spiritually honed. His spiritual strength, even before Delilah cut his hair, was sapped. It was sapped from him by his lack of spiritual character that he should have been developing. He was getting involved with various women, and ultimately here, Delilah, a manipulative woman who didn't have his best interests at heart, he got into that, and he was weakened and didn't even know that it had happened. Think of the state of our nation today in America. Would you say that by and large the people of this nation are strengthened and more sharpened than ever? Or are we as a nation becoming sapped of our strength and tapped out? Where are we spiritually? Think of the state of our Christian lives. Could we be allowing ourselves to fall into the same pattern while not knowing that our strength is leaving us? One of the ways to address that and to analyze that we'll look at through the remainder of the message today, let's go to Daniel 5, is to ask ourselves and to remind ourselves in our spiritual workout routine that we make time daily for in our busy schedules, because we recognize the importance of that, to know from where you and I acquire our strength. Where do we acquire our strength? From where does your strength originate? it is so important for us, well, on two fronts. It's so important for us, on the one hand, to recognize, yes, that our strength comes from God. That is important. But it's also an act of faith to say, yes, God gives me strength. And I can be strong in the Lord. I can do all things through Jesus Christ who strengthens me. I can do this, as opposed to doubting, which takes on the persona of so many when things get down. Daniel 5 is a great lesson in where do we acquire our strength. Daniel 5 verse 1, Belshazzar comes to rule after his father, Nebuchadnezzar, in Babylon. Of course, Daniel was around at that time. Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. So while he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords and his wives and his concubines might drink up. So they did that. They brought them there. They drank from them. They drank wine and were not behaving appropriately. Notice verse 4. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver as they're drinking from these vessels from the temple, bronze and irons, wood and stone. Verse 5, in the same hour, here comes the fingers of a man's hand appearing and writing on opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. So this writing is taking place, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. So all of a sudden, of course, he realizes something's wrong here in River City and starts calling for all the astrologers. Nobody knows what's going on. Then the wife of the king, the queen, because of the words of the king, verse 10, and his lords came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the Spirit of the holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. So in this individual, in Daniel, is an excellent spirit. Can that be said of us? Knowledge, can that be said of us? Understanding, can that be said of us? And in this particular to his role, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas are found in this Daniel. So Daniel is brought in before him, and the king's asking if this is the individual, and he's, yes, I am. I've heard of you. I've heard that the Spirit of God is in you. So now we come to verse 16. He says, here's what I'm prepared to give you. I'm going to give you all of these things. I'll make you third ruler in the kingdom. Verse 17. Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself. I have no need of these. I have no desire for these. Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king, and I'll make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and majesty, glory, and honor. God gave it to you. God gave it to your father, he says here. He didn't get that himself. God gave that to Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 19, and because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations trembled, languages, they trembled in fear before him. Whom he wanted to execute, he executed. Whom he wanted to keep alive, he kept alive. He set others up, he set them down according to what he desired. But when his heart, Nebuchadnezzar's heart, was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, think of what we just read about what Amos said about the people of Israel. He was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. He was like a beast. He was, going around eating grass like oxen and rolling around in the dew and the grass. He was wet with the dew of heaven. And it says, verse 21, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and he appoints over it whomever he chooses. Notice verse 22, but you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew this. He says, you knew this, Belshazzar. You knew all of this, and yet you have chosen not to give God the glory. As Nebuchadnezzar came to understand, you had all this knowledge, but you didn't do it. With knowledge comes accountability. And you've lifted up yourself instead against the Lord of heaven, brought these vessels here before and drank wine from him, all that was going on. So he said, as he gave the interpretation of what would happen, he still, verse 29, Belshazzar gave the command. They clothed Daniel with purple and put all this around him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And Daniel's thinking, okay, yeah, do what you're going to do here. It makes no difference to me. Verse 30, that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede ruled in his stead. I don't know how many of you are sports junkies out here, but how many of you saw this past Monday night's NCAA championship football game? How many of you watched that? I want to see the percentages if it equals Sherman. Yeah, it's about the same. I know a lot of people were somewhat upset about TCU not being in that fourth spot, because this year it was the first year that they did a playoff where the first seed played the fourth and the second played the third, and then the winners played each other for the championship. But Ohio State sneaked in as number 4. And I was a bit torn in the championship game because we spent 6 years in Oregon. Oregon's never won a national championship in football. But at the same time, as I mentioned in an email to you guys, my parents were both attended Ohio State University, so it's their alma mater. So I was pulling for Ohio State, and in seeing them play and win, I felt somewhat elated, but I won't get into too much of my joy. But I was very impressed with both teams. I was impressed. I would have liked to have read more on the backstory of the quarterback from Hawaii who played for Oregon. Several of the announcers said this guy is a class act. He is just really a top individual and an ambassador for the state of Hawaii. But they spoke very highly of him. But I want to get to the issue of what happened after the game. I always get a little irked by announcers that have these interviews afterwards. You just won and you're out there on the field and they come up with this microphone and they want to ask you these questions, and you're trying to celebrate with your team, but they know to do that. But anyway, they pulled aside Coach Urban Meyer for Ohio State University. And again, we're thinking about, from where do you and I acquire our strength? So they asked him, the interviewer said, can you comment on the play of Cordell Jones and Zeke Elliott and what they did for you? Of course, Zeke Elliott was the halfback. He rushed 246 yards, which is just phenomenal. I don't know that there's ever been that great of a rushing effort by a single halfback in a championship football game ever. So he was talking, he wanted the coach to comment on that. And then also Cordell Jones. Here, Cordell Jones was a third-string quarterback playing in the championship game, a third-string quarterback who only played in 3 games that year. The first 2 quarterbacks got injured or whatever, and with 1 game left in the regular season, he was put in the starting quarterback role, first time ever to be in that role. And I think maybe he had taken a snap or 2, and handed off during the regular season, but that was about it. Everything's on the line. And then his second game of his college career as a freshman is to be there as in the semifinal game of the playoffs. And then the third game that he's ever started is the championship game. So these 2 guys played just phenomenal games. So the reporter comes up and says to Coach Urban Meyer, "Can you just comment on the play of these 2 individuals tonight?" And Coach Meyer was like the politician who refuses to answer the question. That usually ticks me off too. You're asked a question and you're not going to answer it. You're going to say your own thing. But I understood why he did what he did. He just refused to acknowledge the question. He said he just kind of reframed it. He said, "Look at the score up there. The most explosive offensive team in the nation that averages 40-some points a game throughout the regular season and has scored much more than that, scored 20 points tonight." He said, "I give all our credit to the defense. The defense just played a great game. He just rephrased it. He reframed it. Do you think he was proud of those two players? Of course he was. Then Zeke Elliott, this guy who was this halfback who rushed 246 yards in the title game, considered to have played one of the best games ever at that slot in a championship game. The announcer came up to him and said, "So can you just describe what it's like to have played the best game ever as a halfback?" Something like that. And he just kind of looked at her, and he reframed the question. He didn't even address it. He said, "You know what? It is a team effort. And I give all the credit to our offensive line. Those guys are just grinders. They've been grinders all season. They work so hard to create the holes, and I have to run through them. But I give the credit to our offensive line." He gave credit where credit was due. I think of individuals in the church that I've talked to over the years. I think of everything that I've read over the years in Mr. Armstrong's autobiography. Where does he give the credit? I'm a pretty bright guy. I've got some great ideas, and I was able to do this and that and this and that. No, he said, God had to bring me to the point where he completely humbled me for me to be able to be in a position to where God could use me to do what he wants with me. I'm a worn-out piece of junk, but God is great, and God can do all things. Let's go to Proverbs 16. I want to expound a little bit on the Belshazzar of Babylon and the Ohio State players' contrasting philosophies. One of the most disgusting things for me to watch on TV is when a person scores or does something and just kind of lets the world know. It's where they kind of go like, they kind of arch their back and they go like this: "Just look at me, people. See me? I am beautiful. I am incredible. I am the best ever." They did this kind of, it's just trash. It's all trash. It's such a neat thing to see someone in athletics recognize and give credit to others. That is a small taste of how we should live our day in and day out lives as we're exercising for the big game. Proverbs 16, verse 18. Proverbs 16, verse 18, the statement is made a familiar one. Pride goes before destruction. You think you got something? You think you got something that everybody can really appreciate? That is telling us we're about ready to go down hard. A haughty spirit before a fall. It is much better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. Another thought, let's go over to Revelation 3. Revelation 3. Another thought in thinking about that halfback's answer this week when they talked to him about, tell me what it's like to be that individual that played such an incredible game. What's that like for you personally? And to hear him just turn it back to the incredible offensive line that opened the holes for him. In thinking about that answer, that kind of answer comes from a well-coached player. It comes from a well-coached player, a person who embraced his coach's philosophy, his coach's strategies. Do we know the game strategy of our head coach, the leader of the Church of God? Do we know Jesus Christ's strategy? Or do we hold on to some of our own strategies that have worked for us that are not necessarily biblically based, but they work? And we've had some effectiveness in those. Is there anything like that? Because you could see from those guys talking, that same approach that their coach had bled over into the thoughts of the players. Be it the quarterback, be it the halfback, be it the lineman, be it all of them. Have we taken on his approach, Jesus Christ's approach, and made it our own? Because the degree to which we do that, individually and the degree to which we do that as a church, is the degree to which we move effectively forward and go towards the kingdom of God. The degree to which we hold back and say, you know what, I mean, that's what we're doing, and I know that's what works for most people, but that's really not my strategy. I kind of work out here. The degree to which we do that, going by a different game plan, is the degree to which we fracture off the church and fracture off the ability for the Holy Spirit to function in that capacity of the unity of the Spirit. Our senses have to be exercised. We have to be working and training and focusing for everything versus atrophying. How do we atrophy? A week turns into a month. A month turns into a year, as Mr. Demarest said. Where are we? Are we in that a week turns into a month? Are any of us allowing ourselves to get into that phase where a week has turned into a month? Or are we saying, man, I have got to get to it. I've got to get to it now. I've got to stay with it. God has helped me stay with it. And boy, I've got to stay. I've got to continue to stay on it. I cannot slip away. Or has a year turned into several years? Now is the time. I find it interesting that the subject of strength is addressed with the final three churches in Revelation 3. You know, different people talk about different thoughts of the churches of Revelation. Are they attributes that are in these different churches? Are they attributes that are to some degree in various individuals throughout any given era of the church? Are there, if it is a time frame of these eras, the final three, are those final three eras kind of in existence at the same time? Or is it clearly one to the other? But I think it's interesting that strength is addressed in each of those last three. Potentially, I think all three messages apply to those of us in this room today with respect to strength. Revelation 3, verse 1, Sardis. And to the angel, the messenger of the church in Sardis, these things says he who has the seven spirits of God. I know your works. You have a name, that you are alive. You have a name, but you're dead. You're dead. A week turns into a month. A month turns into a year. Oh, you're alive, but you're dead. What's he say? Be watchful. Strengthen the things that which remain. What did Samson do? Samson was completely decimated in his strength. He was becoming more and more decimated spiritually, and he didn't realize it until he'd come to that point that the strength was not there, and then his eyes are gone, and he's working at the grinder. So he had a little strength. The thing about Samson that I think is the beautiful story of his life is that Samson, with God's help, strengthened the things which remain. He repented, he turned from that, and God gave him what he gave him in the end to continue to serve him, so that he landed in Hebrews 11. Strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die, for I have not found your works perfect before God. We can fall into that category. Philadelphia, verse 8. I know your works. See, I've set before you an open door. No one can shut it. I am the God who has the might and the power, and I can open these doors for you. And you know what? If I open it, no one's going to shut it. I'm the only one that shuts that. For you have a little strength. A little strength. Not a lot, but you have a little strength. But you've kept my word, and you've not denied my name. You know, Cliff was talking about that the person who has peace that reflects upon the words of God, that reflects upon the ways of God, thinks about that and lives that little strength is there. God will give that to those of us who keep his word and don't deny his name. And then we see Laodicea in verse 14. Laodicea begins to be discussed. Verse 17, he says, because you say, I've got strength, I've got it all, I'm rich, I've become wealthy, things are going well. Israel, in the day of Amos, Israel, in today's world, we've got things. What do I need? I have need of nothing. I know we have financial struggles here and there, but in comparison to the rest of the world, we are richly blessed. I've got everything. And we don't know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. Samson did not know that God's strength had left him. Revelation 3, verse 18 tells how to re-strengthen that. Laodicea, being comfortable with our atrophied state, not realizing to the degree the atrophy has set in. Let's turn finally to Isaiah 40. I play a sport, one that I've gotten to really enjoy over the last 3 years. As I have time, I don't have a lot of time to play it, but I've talked to several of you about it. It's called pickleball. It's played on a court that's about the size of a badminton court, and it's a paddle sport. The paddle's about that long, and it has a grip and just a little paddle sport with a wiffle ball about that big. And the tennis net's just a little bit lower than the pickleball net is a little bit lower than the tennis net, but it's a fun sport. It's a quick, fast-paced sport. But there's a fellow I play pickleball with occasionally when I am able to get down to North Dallas to play. This guy lives over in Robeson Ranch. I don't know how many of you know the area, but Robeson Ranch is south of Denton on the way to Fort Worth. It's a retirement community. So you got to, if you're not 55, you're not getting in there. Or you got to be, your wife's got to be, marry a woman about 10, 15 years older than you. So when you're 40 and she hits 55, you can join Robeson Ranch. So whatever, that's a little strategy. I'll throw that out there for free. But you have to have at least one spouse who is 55 or older to live there. Well, there's this fellow that lives there and plays a lot, but he comes down and plays in North Dallas occasionally. His name's Ford. He's about 70. And he's older. I mean, you see him walk. He's a little stiff, but he plays pickleball all the time. And he takes care of his body. He's fairly fit. He plays regularly, and he's a student of the game. He understands the game and the strategy of the game. And if you make a mistake as you play against him in doubles, he will drive that ball down your throat and smile. And I've learned to appreciate getting the ball driven down my throat because I realized he outplayed me. But the neat thing about this individual is he's gotten older, and as his body has deteriorated, even though he sees himself in his late 20s, he plays within his abilities. He recognizes that he doesn't have a lot of strength. He has a little strength, but he trains and he hones his skills to where he strives to make the perfect shot at the perfect time each time he strokes the ball as it comes across the net. As Clint Eastwood said in his movies, a man's got to know his limitations. And do we know our limitations? And as a result, because of our limitations, are we training spiritually and honing ourselves day in and day out? Do we? Or are we like the guy or the gal who hasn't played ball for 20 years and comes out to the court and thinks, you know what, I'm going to make a move and I'm going to blow by these guys. And yeah, we make a move, but, well, sometimes it's the blubber that moves while we go this way. Or sometimes it's the knee that blows out because we haven't exercised ourselves to the point of being able to play the game at the level that it needs to be played. It is that way spiritually. Where are we? Has a month become a year? Has a week become a month? Or are we honing it day in and day out? Deuteronomy 28 states that with Israel it will come upon them quickly. Where are we? Where are we? Isaiah 40. We'll start in verse 27. It's a beautiful poetic statement that is made here about our lives and what God expects of us and from where our strength can be derived. May we acknowledge that and build upon that by training daily, by making the priority to train daily for that, to have the strength that only God can give us. Isaiah 40, verse 27. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, or my just claim is passed over by my God? He said, why do you say that? He says, have you not known, have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, he neither faints nor is weary. God doesn't faint. God is filled with strength. God is filled with might. And he says, come to me and I will give you that strength. He doesn't faint nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. Verse 29, he gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might, he increases strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary. And the young men, the filled with vitality, even the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord, and think again of Mr. Demarest's message with what is truly important in life. Those who wait on the Lord, they're thinking about that way of life. We're focusing upon that way of life. We're exercising ourselves in that way of life. Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. May we remember from where our strength comes. Ask for it. Ask God and have the confidence as we seek it that God will give it to us so that as the difficult days come, we can be strengthened and sharpened and not sapped and tapped.